So let me introduce our speaker. Dr. Patricia Richelle Trifilo is an educator with specialties in life science, anatomy and neuroanatomy, and an online course designer. Originally from Peoria, Illinois, Dr. Trifilo obtained her BS degree from the University of Iowa in 1976, and at St. Louis University she obtained a Master's of Science in 1978. She continued doctoral studies at St. Louis University in the area of synapse formation in newborn kittens. She married Dr. Richard Trifilo, an Air Force physician and flight surgeon, and spent 26 years teaching at various universities and schools throughout the world and raising 2 children. While teaching for the University of Maryland in South Korea and in their online program, Dr. Trifilo developed an interest in online course design and delivery. She recently completed a PhD in education with a specialty in instructional design for online learning from Capella University. The dissertation research studied the effects of following learning style pathways on learning and satisfaction in non-science major undergraduates. Her research interests include learning styles, their neuroanatomical basis, of learning using functional MRIs and strategies for teaching science to non-science majors. She's won an award for presentations given at the Texas Academy of Science, and she's given numerous presentations across the nation, and she's been a guest speaker on the topic of learning styles in person and via webinars at several schools and universities. And currently, Dr. Trifilo is an assistant professor of biology and director of online learning at Hardin-Simmons University in Abilene. So having said that, Trish, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you. And
all righty.
They should be able to see your screen any moment now.
That should be it, I think.
We can see it, we can hear it.
All right, sounds like a good plan. Well, I'm excited about learning styles and what SoftChalk has done for me, so I'd like to share it with you. What I'd like to know, and I'm going to put the first poll up for you, if you had to do a report on this particular vehicle, I'd like to know what the first resource you would go to, just for fun. I know there's lots of different ways of acquiring information, and people have lots of choices. See what we get.
Very interesting. Okay, well, I voted as well.
All righty. All right, so how do I
I think most of the people have voted, so I think I'll close the poll and let people take a look at it.
All right, so I've got 18% who will read it, 25 like to look at statistics, 18 take a test drive. That's what I'd like to do. Talk to an owner. This is my husband's car. And 37 watch videos. All right. Well, all of those are learning styles. There are, as I get my computer going here, if we wanted to define learning styles, I use this definition. It's a combination of cognitive processes, all the different things that are going on in the brain, and I'm actually going to be talking a lot about that in the beginning. And then a preference for mode. That means, do you like to look at words, listen to sounds, watch movies, or touch it with your hands? And then strategies to attain the information. Do you like to work with numbers and graphs? Do you like to build or organize it? Do you like to talk to people about it? So those are the 3 things that make up or define learning styles. Now, there are lots of different ways to categorize learning styles. There are over 200 different surveys out there trying to decide how to define them according to that person's grouping. This is one by Rita Dunn and Ken Dunn. Rita just recently died this summer, which was a real loss to our industry. But she and her husband set up a learning style model based on several things, and you'll notice we have environmental, emotional, sociological, physiological, psychological, and all of those are really important if you're looking at learning styles, but I do a lot of my work online or in the classroom with online components. and I don't have too much control over the temperature or where they're seating or the lighting or if they ate dinner or not. So what they've come up to define learning styles doesn't help me very much. Cold is also very much in the forefront of learning styles. He has a wonderful organization and learning style survey. It tells you some things. Person might be accommodating, they like to feel and do things, they might be diverging, they like to feel and watch. All of these are good, but as an instructional designer, this one doesn't do anything for me. If somebody comes up and says, well, I have an accommodating learning style, I don't know, how should I design that instruction? Do I put things on movies? Do I make sure they have a lot of hands-on? That would seem to answer it. But I've only got really 4 categories to choose from, and there's lots of different ways of presenting instruction. So this one is not one that I use. I prefer Canfield learning styles. Now this was actually developed in the 60s, and Canfield has 16 different learning styles, but I'm looking at just 8 of them, and these are the ones that I used in my research. In Canfield, they have listening, reading, iconic, direct experience, numeric, qualitative, inanimate, and people. And these descriptions make it a lot easier for me to think up some kind of instructional strategies, because I know if someone who listens and has a listening learning style, then I need to put in speeches or lectures or podcasts or something, music, so that I can help them acquire the information through that mode, and of course all of the other ones. And so I kind of like, just for fun, Steve, to pop up that second poll. I would like to know what our audience thinks their dominant learning style is. Out of these 8, now we've combined them, I know, into 5, because our poll didn't allow us to do all 8. So we've kind of combined a couple. But what's your dominant learning style? That's what I'd like to know.
At least what we think it is, huh?
At least what we think it is. What you think it is may not be what it is.
Okay, again, most of the people have voted. They're very responsive to these polls, so I'm going to close it on down and share the results.
All right. I'm going to find where I am here. Oh, there we go. So we have a lot of direct experience, 33 listening or reading, 9 iconic, couple numeric. And you know, it's kind of interesting. I have a lot of numeric students or inanimate students, and most of them did not think they were numeric or inanimate in my research. But I'll come up to that one as we talk. Very interesting. All right. So we have learning styles. Let's go on and see what we can do with these. All right, first of all, everyone has more than one learning style. You don't just have one, you have probably 3 or 4. And obviously in Canfield, he has 8 to choose from, and you're forced to choose, and later on I'll show you the Canfield survey. You're forced to choose or make decisions all the way through a survey, and then they rank them from the most dominant one to the least dominant one. Learning style theory is based on multiple intelligences, and everybody's intelligent, and so we have lots of different intelligences, and you may not be very good at music, but there might be times in your life when you're very interested in it and learn a lot about it. With these learning styles, you have one really dominant style, and most people are not aware of what that true dominant style is. In my research, in the control, where people didn't know their learning style, I had 84% of my learners who were not readers or listeners select reading and listening as the first type of thing they went to learn the material for the lab. And I think that's because they've always been told, read the textbook, read the material, listen to my lecture, and you will learn it. But 84% of them did not have reading or listening as a dominant style. Let's get into this biological process a little bit. Neurons are brain cells, and they have one end of the nerve cell that collects information. Information comes in these receptors, these ends of the nerve cells called dendrites, and we're going to receive information from our eyes, our ears, taste, sound, touch, smell. All of those are involved in learning. You can't shut one or the other off very easily. And the dendrites pick up the information and they bring them into the brain and they form what we call a synapse in a particular area of the brain. And that is a chemical interaction, and it will be what helps form or cite that memory. Now, reinforcement is really important because now we're talking about a pathway, something that comes in through a sensory receiver and is placed via the brain into a particular spot. And the more you do that in that same pathway, the stronger the memory becomes. You lay down more synapses, and not just more synapses, but you start to interconnect with different areas of the brain and senses that came in while you were learning that particular thing. Now, for example, let's say you're on your back porch in the backyard and you see a red flash go by. So you bring this information into your brain, and it's going to deposit itself in this occipital region, which is important in sight, and it'll note the dimension, the size, the color, the shape of all of that red. And then let's say somebody had told you that that thing that flew by is called a bird. Or perhaps you read about it and you wonder if that's a bird. Well, that word is in your memory, and it's over here in the frontal cortex where maybe it's been stored. And then let's suspect that you heard that sound the same time the flash went by. And so that sound is going to come in and locate itself in your temporal lobe. So this is one event. You had several sensory inputs for that, and they're located in different areas of the brain. This is a real nerve cell. It's a special microscopic technique, and all of these little processes here are dendrites. They're the ones bringing information in. This is the nerve cell body, and this is the axon that will go off and form a synapse someplace in the brain. Now, I said it's not really simple like this. It's more like this, where you have nerves bringing in information and interconnecting between other nerves that brought in different information so that they're much more interconnected and interrelated. And the more information, the same kind of information that's brought in, the more synapses, the stronger the connection and the stronger the interconnection. This nerve cell, there are 3 nerve cells here, and you'll notice that there are several processes. All of these little dots here are interconnections. And I think that's just amazing. Here we have this complex structure that has so many interconnections. To give you another example of how different inputs at the same time are related, think about baking bread. Imagine you're in your grandmother's kitchen. She's been baking bread. You can smell it. You can taste it, and the texture of that bread, and it's warm, and Grandma gives you a hug, and all of those are a wonderful memory. And now, older, you're driving down the street, and you suddenly smell that same smell. It isn't that you just go, that's a bread smell. You start looking for the bakery, and it brings back all the memories of Grandma in the kitchen and the sense of well-being that you had. That's what learning is really about. It's not just a single input of information, but it's a combination of different sensory inputs that help establish the memory and remain interconnected. So very complex, and we want to know how we can make that better for our learner and make it easier. Well, since I know this much about the brain, and here we have a brain, and this is kind of a schematic of what all these different fibers and interconnections might look like, I want to relate it to learning styles. Let's say this learning style here is your dominant learning style. Nice straight road. You can see pretty much where you want to go. Not too much traffic. There are interconnections here, but they don't seem to bother you at all. So you're just going to go right along your way. Kind of like you do when you drive to work in the morning. You know, you're going down the road and suddenly you're at work and you don't remember going through those stoplights and turning left and right because it was a clear path. You know how to get there. You know all the techniques to get there. And you know that path so well. And it's so easy to drive that you could look at the children at the bus stop or notice that there's a sale going on at that store or think about what you're going to be doing at work, and you still are able to get to your destination. But if I put a roadblock in this road, an accident, and you have to take one of these detours, you come into the neighborhood here, and it's a little bit different. It's a little foggy. You can't see your destination quite anymore, but you know it's up there. It's not too far away. The path winds a little bit. There are things to the left and the right that you recognize, but you know you really don't pay too close attention to them because you want to get to your destination and you don't want to get lost. So you slow down, you follow the path, you look to see how to get back to this main road that you know is the easy path. And so you take this detour. This area is kind of like your subdominant learning styles. You certainly can learn this way. That would be very easy to do, but you don't have all the comfort and all of the tools that you would have in a direct dominant pathway. So you have to work a little bit harder, and you hope that you have some interconnections that will give you clues on how to make the right turns to get back to the pathway. This third one is what it might look like if a teacher suggests that you go down a learning style that is not your normal or dominant or even your subdominant pathways. It's pretty dark. It's kind of murky. You can't see where you're going. You don't see anything on the sides because you can't pull in any information because it's not familiar and it's kind of dark. You want to get there, but it's scary. You don't know what's going to jump out in front of you. Now, a good teacher could lead you down that pathway and get you back to the destination. But a lot of our students aren't that attentive. Perhaps they're not very good students, or perhaps they're just afraid to do that. And so they'll say, oh, I don't want to study that. I don't know how to do that. I'm not interested. I'm just going to quit. And if they quit, we've lost them. So we want to know about the dominant and subdominant pathways and how we can bring that type of neural connections into our instruction. Let me tell you a little bit about my research that I did and why I found this is really important. In my research, I took students who had to take a science lab, but they were non-science majors. A lot of art, music, business students, and they take these two labs, fermentation lab and the enzyme lab, all required, and a post-test. So whether they take it in my class or someone else's class, it's the same instruction, same post-test. I asked them to come into a classroom, and in my control group, I surveyed to find those that knew nothing about learning styles. And I told them that my classroom was an online classroom that I was designing, and I had put together different methods or strategies to teach about fermentation and enzyme. And I wanted them to go ahead and select any 4, and they had 8 icons to choose from that matched Canfield's learning style. Of course, they didn't know that, but they were icons like a book for reading or a headphone for listening, and they could choose any of the 8 that they wanted, 4 in each instruction, and learn the material, and they had to take a post-test. And I checked to see if they enjoyed themselves and got some comments about the instruction. And then I did the Canfield survey to determine what their learning styles were, so I could compare what they chose against what their learning styles were. In the experimental group, they entered Blackboard, and I told them all about learning styles, a lot of the things that I'm telling you today, and had them take the Canfield survey and determined their dominant and their 4 subdominant learning styles in order, and told them what the path was. Had them come into the classroom and select, in the order of their pathway, the dominant, first subdominant, second subdominant, third subdominant instruction for each fermentation and enzyme. Then I had them take a post-test and a satisfaction survey. Here's what I found. 130 students participated completely. This was my experimental group who knew about their learning styles. This was my control group who did not know about learning styles. The mean score of those taking the post-test who knew about learning styles was 75.3. For those who did not know their learning styles and just selected randomly, their score was 53.7. That's extremely significant difference. Then I looked at these 65 and I said, okay, how many of you really followed the pathway exactly as I suggested? Well, there were 42 of them that did that. There were 23 who didn't follow it exactly. Some switched the order at the end. Some of them left one off. There were only a couple that didn't follow directions at all, but they were, of course, included. And the average score of those who followed exactly was 79.2, while the mean for those who did not follow exactly was 70.5. Again, extremely significant difference. Now, how about dominant? Is that dominant instruction really important? Or could we just throw it in there anywhere? Well, first I wanted to know if the dominant instruction, the dominant learning style was important. So anybody who did the dominant learning style, out of all 130 people, were put into this group, and then if they didn't do the dominant learning style, there were 26 of them, were put in this group. So if they did the dominant, 67.7 for the mean. If they didn't do the dominant learning style, 52.0. Again, extremely significant. So we've got some really important information coming out from this study. Here's, for those who are numeric, here's a graph. Green is experimental, yellow is control. I'll explain the types in just a minute. This is passing, 70%. These little bars here indicate standard deviation with the error. So if these bars overlap, generally there's no difference between them. If the bars don't overlap, then there is a significant difference between them. So it's an eyeball type of information that you can gather, and then you can do the statistical analysis. Type 1 followed exactly. Type 2 followed exactly, except they switched 3 with 4. So they did number 1, number 2, number 4, number 3. Type 4 followed exactly but left off number 4. So they only did 3 learning styles. So of these, you'll notice that there's no real difference in their score significantly. And they did the dominant first. They did the first subdominant and the second subdominant. These switched them around. But there's no real difference in score between these 3. Type 3 did all 4 instructions, but they didn't do the dominant first. And that's significant. They did exactly what these guys did, but didn't do the dominant first. I had 3 control people that managed to select 3 styles that did match their Canfield survey, and they did the dominant first. And so they did pretty well. They still don't have a passing score, as you can see, though there's some that are up there. But they didn't know about learning styles, didn't know the significance of them, and so that seems to have an influence. These guys down here in type 5 and type 6 were the ones in my experimental that didn't follow directions, or that only had, these guys selected either 2 or 3 of the learning styles, and these selected 0 or 1 of the learning styles that matched their Canfield. You can see they're below 70%, so they were non-passing. These who did the dominant instruction in the experimental. Some of these did in each of these in the control. But we can see that just randomly picking instruction doesn't seem to be very effective in learning. Now this is a lot of words, so you can just kind of read through and see what you find interesting. These were the satisfaction survey comments. I did quantify the satisfaction data, but I thought the comments were really interesting because the control group knew nothing about learning styles. They were just playing around selecting ones that they thought they would like to learn from. And they quickly determined that some certain instruction was pretty good and others they didn't really care for. They liked the different activities. And they found that sometimes when they did different activities that they thought they liked, but then combined it with another one, it made more sense. So they all enjoyed the instruction. Now the experimental group understood what was going on. They understood that they were following learning styles. And suddenly they said, it helped me to learn by doing more than one method. I didn't know I was a peer learner. I didn't know it would help so much. It did. And the one that I really like is working in my area of learning was great. Everything seemed to make so much more sense to me. So what can I conclude about the research? It's important to know about learning styles. It's important for the student to know what their learning styles are. It's important for the instructor to have some idea of what they are. And then if you have an instructional designer, that would be good so that they know what kind of attributes to bring in. The dominant learning style seems to be a pretty important or significant component to learning. Remember that clear road. If you can put your students down a clear road in the very beginning, then when you start to make turns and twists on the side roads, they don't get so lost. They have an idea of what's coming and how to get there. This pathway leads to successful cognitive outcomes. Learners who follow a pathway feel empowered and they take ownership of the learning experience. Those of you that are teaching online, this is really important because if it's not relevant to them and they don't feel that they're participating or making a contribution, you're going to lose them. They're going to go away. They don't really care. They'll just do what they have to do to get by. And then learners with learning style knowledge express the joy of learning, sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. Okay, so let's not just go for this way. Okay, so what does that do for me, and how do I use SoftChalk to incorporate this information in my instruction? What I've got right here is a SoftChalk lesson that I had incorporated into 3 of them into an e-course. You can build a whole course with different lessons in it, and I thought that would be kind of interesting to see. And you'll see on this panel over here, I have my first lesson, and I have various pages that do different things. And a lot of this is things that I've already told you, but what I'd like to go to is, well, before I do that, when you're doing SoftChalk, did you know that you can put in a table? And if you set a table with 3 columns, you can put your pictures and words and organize them across the page that way. It makes it really easy to organize things. So let me get on to the survey. This is the Canfield survey. And it has 30 questions on it, and you are forced to rank each of these components 1, 2, 3, and 4 for each statement or question. And when you get done with all 30, and you'll be able to go back, this is on the techweb.org site, and you'll be able to make connections. I'll make this available to everybody. When you get done, you click on your score, and you're going to need to know what you wrote for each answer. So you might want to print it out or write it down, or print this out and go back and take it, because you need to put your answers in here, have to do a little math, addition and subtraction. It will give you a score, and then you put this score on the grid, and you can find these different modes. Now, I used a computer program to run this. I used a macro so that I didn't have to do all this kind of calculation. But it really takes about 20 minutes to take the poll, and it just takes a matter of about 5 minutes to determine your learning styles. If it's way up here to the top of this table, then that is a dominant learning style, and the ones that fall down here would be the less dominant learning styles. And remember, you have lots of learning styles. Okay, so these are the learning style icons that I used in my research, and these are the ones that I use in my classroom. And the students know that each of them have a particular meaning to them. Now, this is where we're going to try a little interactivity, Steve. We'll see what happens on this. In the chat function, I guess, nope, we're doing question function, I'm sorry. In the question function, I would like you, as I go through some of these, to real quickly put up a couple of words or phrases of activities that you might do as I go through these. For example, for the reading style, these are people who like to examine words. If you were going to design something in a classroom, how would you put the words up there? I could just type in text, but do you guys have any interesting ways to put words up? What are some different ways? See if we can get anybody to type into my question
we got
box.
tables, and we've got word clouds, projectors, bullets,
Okay.
links, word
Great.
art, word
Okay,
synchronized with
exactly.
images.
You can do all sorts of different things, and SoftChalk lets you link in. You can bring in PDFs, you can set up tables, you can bring in PowerPoint, you can link to websites, you can do all sorts of interesting things, and I'll show you some of the different ones that I'm doing in my lessons. Okay, how about listening? In here, I have this one. Okay.
The first two were podcasts.
Right, good. Music, there we go.
Audio bites.
Exactly. You can put, okay, you can put all those little things. Now, what's important when you're thinking about learning styles is that you don't have to do everything for everyone, and you don't have to do the whole class in one learning style. And I'm going to show you how I approach that. But you need to intersperse these possibilities in areas of your instruction so that a student who's been reading perhaps, and that's not their dominant style, if they could have off to the side a little icon and they know they can pick up that little podcast, or they can get a sound bite, or maybe hear how a sound effect of this thing you're describing is, that will suddenly link into that dominant learning style and kind of open the pathway a little bit, make up some connections for them. Okay, video. When you look at video, we're not just talking about words and sounds. A lot of people go, well, if they can read and they're listening to sounds, video should work for all of them. And that's not true, because video includes frames per second and changing of graphics and such. Here's the one that I put in here just real quickly. So you can see I have a little music, we've got graphics, we've got some words coming up in there, and this will stop in just a second. So it's a real brief input. And I'm going to talk about a couple of things. I use Jing. I'll capture. This is a TechSmith kind of thing. I can capture a very short little video clip and insert it into SoftChalk very easily. And it's free, and it'll record up to 3 minutes, so that's pretty nice. Okay. So what would you do for video? Take pictures with a camera, great. Ooh, I like that one.
Screencasts and animations and changing scenes and YouTubes. And
yep, and SoftChalk lets you bring all those things up. So you got to have a little bit of movement in there. Great.
there's a comment here that Jing is not, ADA accessibility.
That's true. It doesn't have a. Yeah, but you can create a box underneath it that will. You could either put it in audio or you could put it in words to explain what was going on.
Right. SoftChalk always provides a way to make, additional comments, text or whatever you need to do in order to make the content accessible.
Yep, exactly. All right. Yeah, and I use Captivate a lot. I like Captivate a lot. Okay. Now, direct experience is kind of interesting because there are lots of ways to do it, direct experience. You could suggest to the person to do something and handle if they, like I taught for University of Maryland, I had students all over the world, and I would have them take common things that they might find in their dorm room, or had a lot of military people in their tent, and try to do a certain thing to make it hands-on. The other thing you can do is do over the shoulder. Or as in this one this is a Captivate, and I just kind of put a little section on here, how to log into Blackboard. And I just screen captured and threw this in here. So it's probably going to click all through this, right? Oh yeah, okay. Sorry, it won't last long. But you can do lots of different things for direct experience. You'll see in the demonstration that I have coming up here, people will be looking over their shoulder as if you're doing an experiment. And we'll I want to keep on going so we get some more instruction. On the numeric, it doesn't have to be numbers. It can be equations. It can be a graphical representation. What are some ideas that you guys have? You can do do Excel files. You can do a lot of different things along that line.
Yeah, concept maps and charts and spreadsheets and animated graphics and Google spreadsheets, of course.
Google spreadsheets, those are great. Pivot tables, I love pivot tables. And people who work with numbers love to be able to do those type of things where they can see and they can put numbers. I did a demonstration with the Civil War, and we had people who were working with setting up how many troop movements and supply lines and amounts of supplies that they would need to get to a battle. So even though we were trying to talk about the Gettysburg Battle and different things, we had some background information, and they could go out and kind of pretend they were a general trying to figure out how he was going to accomplish this through numbers, and it became much more important to them. Now, writing is lots of fun, and SoftChalk has lots of ways to write. I'll let you throw in your ideas for writing.
Let's see, they're beginning to come in. Wikis. And,
yep.
Blogs.
Stories and scenarios, those are definite. Those are really great. They love to write down different things. They could pretend that they were, writing a letter to their loved one when they were going off to war in the Civil War, something along that line. Discussion boards and writing. Journals, those are really good too. In the inanimate, you're trying to have them build or construct. Timelines are really good for this. Ordering. For a game, I actually put in a widget here that leads us to a Lego game. For the sake, I didn't have anything that I was going to put in particular in my instruction. But I wanted to show you that you could. There are widgets out there that have lots of different things, or you can create a widget. And so you can insert different games and different activities from SoftChalk, which makes it really easy. And then working with people, those people sometimes, that just doesn't make sense to them. They've read about it, they've listened to you talk, they've looked at some of the examples, but until they explain it to someone else or they can ask questions to someone, this peer review becomes really important, trying to get different questions. So you can do discussion boards, group activities, lots of different ways to do that. All right, let's get into our second lesson. This is what I do for my classes. I'm doing a unit on cells and energy, and it's going to include enzymes, fermentation, aerobic respiration, photosynthesis, but I just truncated it here so you could see a particular portion of it. and I do 3-minute summaries of key points that kind of go over cells and energy. And it's a 3-minute blob, and they can do what they want with it, but they know their learning styles. So as they come down here, they can find reading, listening, direct experience, and so forth, and click on that particular one and do what they need to do to get an overview. What I'm doing is accessing their dominant learning style. It gives them some information, it sets down synapses, it opens the pathway, and it interconnects things. And then when I take them off on a style that's maybe not quite the dominant style, they've got some information and interconnections that will hold them in interest and hopefully make them feel not so lost. So the reading one's pretty obvious. I do rollovers, that type of thing. Sometimes I send them to websites, but this is a 3-minute overview, so mostly I try to keep them here. I could go ahead and again, I keep this, I'm not going to read things, I keep this 3 minutes. Don't want to go beyond that. For direct experience, I have a little video that talks about running and aerobic respiration. This one is I put on YouTube, and then I imported it. And you can see it only runs 54 seconds because I have a couple of different things on there. I'm going to kind of go through, and you can end. They actually are looking at the bubbles at the end. So it's almost as if they were there doing what I needed them to do and to see what was being done. In Iconic, and this one always takes a little bit longer to load. Come on, baby. It's basically a 3-minute summary lecture that I make. And we'll give it a chance if it's not going to load. And we'll come back to it in a minute. Numeric, here I've got equations. Now I do more for them in the instruction, but I've got equations. I've got the words and stuff, but they can actually see it in numbers, something graphical that will help them identify what they're doing.
We're kind of running short on time at this point,
yep.
So
I'll move fast here.
Okay, go through it.
All right. So we've got crossword puzzle for those who like to write. For those who like to build, I can do a drop and drag, put things in order. If it's in the wrong place, it'll move. And for peer review, I include a widget that links to a website that I have or to Blackboard if I want it to, and they can make comments and kind of briefly discuss with each other. When I actually bring them into the instruction, I've just got 3 pages here. I incorporate words, I incorporate numbers, I incorporate sound bites. I have a few graphics so that they can see what's going on with the equations. Try to bring in things that might elicit some memories in the pictures that I put together. I can link them to websites so that they can read further. I have paragraphs for those who are qualitative and want to write, and I have drop and drag for those who want to order the inanimate people, the word people, all of those along the line. And then I have an actual video of the experiment that we did. This one will run 6 minutes, and it will look, and they'll actually measure it. And I put an Excel sheet in here, and for those who like numbers and such, maybe I'm going to, all right, quickly, and I'm not, all right. It's set in here so that we can put in numbers. Normally I put this next to the page, and as they put in numbers, it builds a graph, and then they can go back and answer questions that were pertinent to the instruction that's down here. And then I send them to the discussion board. And that's what I do in a very brief time.
Wow. Lots of material. Let me just answer one.
Some
are
questions?
You finished? Yes, there's lots
I'm
of
finished.
questions.
All right.
One of the things that people are asking about is that some of the examples, the videos and audio, were kind of choppy, and is this a problem with SoftChalk created content? And no, the issue is that we're looking through this GoToWebinar interface, and so we have those bandwidth issues to deal with that would not be the case if you were seeing it live through a web browser using, that you built the content with SoftChalk. Let's see. Where do I begin? Well, somebody at the very beginning really praised what excellent information you were doing. Apparently, they did their doctorate research on students with developing math problems and the same kind of issues that you were dealing with. But there's a question here. You envision, let me open this up a bit so I can read the question better. You envision courses designed with multiple presentations of material organized by learning style? Then you would allow students based on learning style? Yep. Go ahead.
When I put courses together, I just designed the regular instruction doing different components like this last 3 pages where I've got things interspersed to make it more interesting. They're not just reading, looking at a website, or a discussion board, which after you do that for 18 weeks gets pretty boring. So I give them some alternate things. But the lesson 2, where I do the run-through really quickly, you would be surprised. I can put together 3-minute presentations. Except for the little videos, I can do all of those different ones in a matter of 45 minutes. And so it isn't hard to do. It's actually a lot of the things you already do in the regular instruction. You're just limiting them. So it doesn't take a lot of time to do the really brief run-throughs. So what I generally do is I write my regular instruction, and then I do the brief run-throughs, brief summaries. I do that as a second step. But you're right. You can't do every lesson in every learning style. We'd never have enough time.
Not to mention
we'd be here until kingdom come.
A lot of stuff to weed through. Another question is, do you have handouts that match some of the learning styles with suggested activities or websites?
Yes, I will get those to you, or they can email me.
Right. At the very end of this presentation, we will give you Tricia's email address. Also, as an exit survey, we will ask you if you want to know more information about the work that Tricia's done. If you say yes for that, I will send that over to Tricia, and she can get back to you, or you can get back to her with her email.
And hopefully a lot of the research stuff will be published soon. I'm waiting, and then we'll be able to take a look at it there, too.
You did some 3-minute chunks to cover some of the video information, or video 3-minute chunks. Do these 3-minute chunks cover the same info? Are you trying to do the same? Yes. Okay, that's what I figured.
Yeah. So basically, in lesson 2, each of these contain the same information. Every single one of them says the same thing, just in a different way.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's comments about how on earth would you find time to put all these choices in? Do you have hired help? Well, I think you just pick and choose carefully from what I've heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. There's a bunch of other questions. What was the web address for learning style tests? And somebody wants to know when your research might be published.
Yes, I'm hoping in the next few months we'll have it. You never know on these things how fast they come up. Let's see. The web address for the Canfield Learning Style Survey, is that what they wanted?
Right.
www.techweb.org. T-E-C-W-E-B, techweb.org. And if you click in there, you'll be able to find on the left-hand side of that web page, it'll say Learning Styles for Canfield, and it'll give you the survey.
Let's see. Yeah, a bunch of questions about when and what you can get published. And can you make these modules available as a demo? people would like to have access to it and, share content where your students are viewing it. I don't know whether that would be a possibility.
I can figure that one out. I'm not against that. Just have to kind of figure out how to do it, I guess.
Okay. Well, we will get some feedback to you for people who would be interested in seeing that. And somebody asked whether or not this webinar will be archived, and I will sort of close this this moment of the presentation by saying, yes, it is now being recorded, and it will be on our website, as I mentioned very early on, because this person came in late as well. So let me take the screen back, and I'm going to just say a couple of things. Because we've been doing these Innovators and Online Learning presentations for 3 years, and we have almost all of those archived on our website. We have new ones coming up every month. So if you liked this, if you enjoyed it, if you want to go on learning other pieces of what people are doing using our software, then please pay attention to that. I send out regular newsletters to that effect. If you have real questions about SoftChalk, the best way to find it is through our basic introductory demonstrations that happen every week. We have short courses, so those of you who really are our clients and say, I really want to know more about Style Builder or embedding media. We have hour sessions taking place regularly. We provide group training, and we come to face-to-face into your institution as well. We have mini tutorials, 3 to 5 minute flash tutorials on our websites or just-in-time learning, extensive documentation. And last year we did and this is important, we did a lesson challenge, and 3 people won $500 each because they got to have the winners. Now we have the winners and the runner-ups on our website, so you can see the work they did. Again, some really interesting work that our clients are doing. We have another lesson challenge coming up, and you can go to our website and find out more about that as well. So go to our homepage in the left-hand column, more information about the lesson challenge winner, and we'd love for all of you to submit your lessons and have the possibility of winning that as well. So I am now going to go to the last page, and so if you want more information about SoftChalk, interested in getting a quotation and buying some, contact our sales team. If you want to talk to me for whatever reason, I'd love to talk to you. I'm at steve@softchalk.com, and our presenter, Trish, that's her email, Pete Trifilo at hsutx.edu. And I want to thank you all for being so attentive and continuing to enjoy what we present you each month. And with that, I am going to say good night for the time. And thank you again, Trish. Wonderful job.